Welcome to Planet Waves TV. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino here with Season 3, Episode 2 of Planet Waves TV. A little more sunshine coming in than last week. I got a little bit of an earlier start today, and I'm here to talk to you about Venus Retrograde, which begins on the 4th, but I'm having trouble here. Yeah, so today's the 3rd, and Saturday is the 4th, and Venus will be retrograde for about 6 weeks. The retrograde will end on the 15th of April, Uncle Sam's birthday and my Grandpa Sam's birthday. And the thing to know about Venus retrograde, the first thing to know about Venus retrograde, is that it's retrograde the least of all the planets. Venus is retrograde for only 6 weeks, approximately, out of every 18 months. That's about 8% of the time. By contrast, Mars is retrograde about 10% of the time, and Mercury is retrograde about 24% of the time, and Pluto is retrograde about 42% of the time. So the further away a planet is, the longer it's retrograde for, with the notable exception of Mercury, because Mercury is moving so quickly and is so close to the sun that it is retrograde quite a bit. But we're talking about Venus today. And this Venus retrograde is distinguished because it begins in Aries and it ends in Pisces. So it crosses over the Pisces-Aries line, and it does something similar to what Mars retrograde did last year, which is begin in Sagittarius and then retrograde into Scorpio. So we have another interplanet retrograde, which is beginning in a fire sign and ending in a water sign. And personally, I don't think that the work of Mars retrograde from last year is done. That was a pretty high level, let's say, learning agenda established by that Mars retrograde, which took place about in the middle of last year. And I used to have all my notes on the wall over my head. I'm like happy that they're not there, because I did like 10 YouTubes on this Mars retrograde and more than that. So this Venus retrograde is a corresponding retrograde. It is a similar story, and it is part of the same story as the Mars retrograde, and that is an internal learning process, which is what retrogrades usually are, and learning something about sex. And let's see if we can figure out what that thing about sex that we need to learn is. My take on Mars retrograde from last year, which began in Sag and ended in Scorpio, and therefore involved Mars passing through Scorpio into Sag and back and forth, was about learning the correspondence between the inherently spiritual nature of Sag and the inherently biological nature of Scorpio. And so there was a lot of cross-teaching going on between the sign which contains the galactic center and the center of the local universe, called the Great Attractor, or Laniakea, Sagittarius, and then Scorpio, which is all about feelings and hormones and desire and love and death, as Woody Allen put it. And now my take is that the lessons of that Mars retrograde are still hanging out with us, and there's still something that we need to learn from that, because for most people, there's nothing spiritual about sex. And in fact, it's one of the lowest vibration things that happens on the planet, usually because of all the guilt and denial that is packed around it. And with the Mars retrograde, there was something particularly intense about the desire nature, as expressed in a typically male way, about that, because that's what we get with Mars, the assertive type of desire, where there are like limitless, endless, countless, taboos packed around wanting anyone or anything. Even though we live in a society that is entirely based on desire, we still manage to take this most common thing that we have and to make it wrong and taboo. It's kind of crazy. And so during 2016, during the Mars retrograde year, we met a presidential candidate who boasted about sexual assault, and then people voted for him. Anybody voted for him. That anyone voted for him is astounding. If you voted for Donald Trump, you have some spiritual work to do. Go ahead and click off or give me a thumbs down. That's my assessment. Anyone who votes for a candidate who openly admits to sexual assault has a problem similar to the problem that candidate has. There's many other character issues with Trump. And that, you might say, is the most shadowy side of Mars retrograde. It was extremely chaotic, and it was disorienting, and it was insisting on a high level of learning, that Mars retrograde. When you take subjects as seemingly disparate as one's essential spiritual nature and one's sexual nature, and put them together and say, well, these two things that the culture just rips in half, and therefore in the process rips us in half, and say, well, it's time to understand they're really part of the same process. They're part of the same thing. So we get a little bit of a parallel but different theme with Venus retrograde, and it begins the retrograde in Aries, the first sign, and it ends the retrograde in Pisces. And Venus is kind of itchy and scratchy in Aries. It's either in detriment or fall or something because it rules Libra. And then it backtracks into Pisces, where Venus is exalted. It's a easy sign for Venus to be in, and I think that it's genuinely a sweet, accessible, resourceful Venus that does what Venus is supposed to do, which is love and nurture and be open to mutual caring and hot cocoa on a cold winter night and all that. And Venus in Aries, on the other hand, is a kind of a blind spot until that blind spot is addressed. And the blind spot of Venus in Aries is a blind spot that our entire society has. If we were to make a chart for contemporary American society, it would have Venus and Aries in it. Now, the U.S. Venus chart does not have Venus and Aries in it, but that's not a chart for our contemporary society. It's a chart for the beginning of the Revolutionary War against England, and England's our friend now, and so we need another chart to describe contemporary American society. And the reason I say that it would have Venus and Aries is because it's hard to get people to think about anyone other than themselves in American culture. And when you do, it should be as simple as typing a thing into your text message and giving $10 to the Earthquake Relief Fund. But that's not really thinking about someone else. That's more about assuaging one's guilt rather than actually taking some challenging personal action that involves vulnerability and commitment and a measure of compromise. All right, so we begin with Venus in Aries. And our culture in the years of the internet has become kind of obsessed with the glamour of self. This is the current issue with Aries right now. And part of how we're seeing that is because Uranus is in Aries, got about one more year, a little bit less than a year in Aries, if I remember correctly. It's been in Aries since it started transitioning in 2010, and it took up residence on March 10th of 2011, the day that the Fukushima incident happened, kind of coming in with a bang, and it'll be interesting to see what happens as Uranus exits Aries. But while Uranus was in Aries, what we got basically was the rise of the portable telephone, the portable, the pocket computer that you could take anywhere and basically broadcast yourself from anywhere. And this begins the selfie age, a new era of self-obsession and basically of vanity. And Uranus is also seduced, in Aries, seduced by the lure of technology. I mean, the technology is so sleek and so sexy and so kind of alluring. that it became the thing in itself and subjugated its own content, its own meaning, its own purpose, its own, in many ways, its own most humanitarian possible uses, which completely, well, not completely, but almost completely remain unexplored. Now we have Venus showing up in Aries and stationing retrograde. And this is saying, okay, around whose feelings do things center? That's one question to ask with Venus and Aries. Who's the locus of gravity in this relationship? Who is the one who tends to make the demands in any relationship, and who is the one who tends to do the compromising in any given relationship? So it's worth taking an honest look at that, and it's worth asking yourself outright: do I compromise enough in my relationships? Am I generous enough? Do I take the opportunity? Has my boyfriend bought me dinner 300 times? When was the last time I bought or made dinner for my boyfriend? And I don't care how little money you have, if you have a boyfriend who's bought you dinner 300 times or 100 times or 20 times, save up and take him out to dinner. This is the kind of shift that's important to bear in mind when we're talking about Venus and Aries. And I mean, look, Venus is about relating, and it's about values. And when Venus is in Aries, the primary sense of values and the primary sense of relating is going to be self-centered, self-oriented. That's just how it's going to be. And that can be addressed, and indeed it needs to be addressed. And it is not just about personal, like boyfriend, girlfriend type or husband, wife type relationships. It really is about every kind of relationship and the expectations that you have for your life, and you know how people are going to how they're supposed to take care of you. I mean, I've noticed there's a little issue lately with work ethic. I mean, has anyone noticed that? But anybody who walks into TGI Fridays or Arby's or wherever you might go, the local neighborhood diner or the Gap, you expect the people who work there to be fully on top of their game and to treat you like a king or a queen. And you might then take that into some other aspect of life and decide, well, now I'm in this role, and I better treat everyone like a king or a queen, because I have this role to fulfill, and that's what I'm doing. And so if you don't deliver that, you better not expect it. And if you do deliver it, you can somewhat hope that that's the way things happen, because you improving your karma changes your world a lot and changes the world somewhat. So there's a silver lining to all of this. And let's take a look at the chart here, which I try to keep simple. I'm not sure I've succeeded at that. And let's take a little pencil here. So here's Venus. This is Aries. I'm setting it up with Aries line with the first house because we've got to put it somewhere. Might as well put it there. And here's Venus in early Aries, right? See that? The little lady's room symbol. And it will go retrograde on Saturday, or went retrograde, depending on when you're listening, on Saturday the 4th. And it will backtrack through all of March and the first 2 weeks of April, and it will enter Pisces. So there's a building process as Venus retrogrades and gets close to what's called the Aries point. The Aries point is right here. The Aries point is this imaginary line, which is printed in bold ink, not looking so imaginary, between Pisces and Aries. And the Aries point is like a magnification device. Dog's barking, just making sure it's not Jonah, who's down in my other office downstairs. Okay, so the interesting thing about Aries, for as self-obsessed as it can be, is at the beginning of Aries, there's this intersection between the personal and the collective, which makes sense because Pisces is the sign of the collective and Aries is the sign of the personal, and one sign is Alpha and one sign is Omega, and they're both very powerful signs of the zodiac. And where they meet matters. Where they meet amplifies that morph, that intersection of personal and political. So there's a building process, and we may see some interesting developments. Is there a day without any interesting developments these days? As Venus retrogrades toward the Aries point, and then it enters into Pisces. And let's just, while I'm here, let's just get the Venus is, I'm using IOSprite, by the way, by time cycle. If you've got a Mac and you get no other astrology program, get this one. All right, on April 2nd, Venus retrogrades into Pisces. The sun will be in Aries. The sun is approaching the Uranus-Eris conjunction, which is in Aries, and which has sort of been like ramping up this whole egocentric thing to the hilt, and will eventually implode on itself. Okay, so then Venus is retrograde in Pisces. It is a whole other flavor and color. You may notice that over this April 2-3 days that there's a shift in the cast of color of like the emotional feeling tone of the emotional environment changes when Venus enters Pisces, and we get closer to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is that now Venus in, let me just move my little sprite out of the way. Sprite looks like this, only the computer put all the details in. So as Venus goes into Pisces, which is this 12 sign here, it begins to retrograde toward Chiron. That is inherently interesting. It would be interesting if Chiron were not in Pisces and Venus were retrograde toward Chiron, and it is especially interesting because of the expanded capabilities that both Venus and Chiron have in Pisces, and the inherent introspective nature of Pisces, the sensitivity of Pisces, and the erotic nature of Pisces. And so you might think of the Pisces part of the retrograde as the layer underneath the Aries part of the retrograde. How would that look? Well, if the Aries part of the retrograde is this recognition of self-obsession that is fed to us, and is force-fed to us, it's very hard to get out of because it's so inherent in the environment that it's difficult to even notice this self-obsession. You really have to start doing things like analyzing TV commercials and see the psychology that they're appealing to in these commercials, right? Everyone is king and queen of the world in these commercials, whether it's the army of one or you're going to be the guy who drives the Jeep up the side of a mountain or whatever it might be. This non-ethic of it's all about you and nobody else matters is pushed on us. And our tools do this. There's a lot of things that do this to us. All right, so when Venus gets into Pisces, the color cast changes, and Venus then heads for Chiron. And when Venus stations retrograde, it does so in a conjunction to Chiron. This is really, really meaningful because what it is suggesting is that the underlying nature of this retrograde is seeking some degree of emotional and sexual healing. And it is very difficult to do that if you're only able to think about yourself. And that reason being that, well, to do healing work, you've got to think about yourself. But the idea of self is the thing that changes. Venus in Aries, it might represent a picture of self that just doesn't change. Venus in Pisces represents a picture of self that is flowing, that is more gender fluid, and that is more receptive and more sensitive. And therefore more open to the possibilities. And when this retrograde ends, it ends with Venus in an exact conjunction to Pisces. And because it's a station direct, Venus hangs out stationary for a while. It may be 4 or 5 days that it does, so I could look it up. I don't feel like interrupting the video, and I don't edit these things. But I'll give you the details a little bit closer to the time and a little bit more in Planet Waves FM on Tuesday. Okay, so Chiron conjunct Venus at the end of the Venus retrograde, that is a destination. This retrograde is going somewhere. It is heading somewhere. And the place it is heading is an experience of emotional and sexual healing, and they are the same thing. Sexual healing and emotional healing involve trust. They involve feeling one's emotions. They involve being open to change. The healing process always involves change, and there's an element of vulnerability that is involved. And this is where this process is heading. And so retrogrades are a question. They are a reference to the past, and they are a reference to inward reality. And I would say that this retrograde is an occasion to take your reality inward and keep going inward until you move from one version of I am, which is Venus in Aries, to another very different version of I am, which is a more encompassing version of self and a more sensitive and reflective version of self that is ultimately open to healing process, that is open to an experience that changes you, that might include an encounter with another person. It might include that other person might be a friend or a lover, that other person might be a mentor or a healer of some kind. And I'll be tracking this pretty much every week, on every channel. I can't get any peace here. Every week on every channel, this sound coming up from upstairs also, if I seem slightly distracted, as this develops, because it's an important retrograde. And if you go back to the events of 2016, you will see that there is a correspondence to the events most likely in your relationships, most likely involving your desire nature, in 2016 involving Mars retrograde and the kind of spiritualizing lessons of that Mars retrograde and what you learned about desire, and the Venus retrograde of 2017 and the way in which this is about, you might call this retrograde get over yourself. Venus retrograde in Aries. And that is what I will call this video. So get over yourself. You're not the only person in the world. That does not mean you have to be codependent, driving everyone around, paying for everyone's whatever. It just means recognize that people have feelings, and you need to ask them what their feelings are, and you need to engage them in understanding what your feelings are. And Venus in Aries is seeking balance. It is seeking equanimity. It is seeking mutuality. It is seeking understanding. And there's always more that you can do to facilitate that mutuality and that understanding. All right. So remember, Planet Waves TV is sponsored by your subscriptions. Planet Waves is a subscription service, and we have been since long before the New York Times or anybody else who is doing this. We're one of the first subscription services on the internet, and potentially the very first one in astrology. And it's good stuff, and I depend on you to be able to keep doing this. This is more than me in my little astrology studio. It takes about 10 people to keep Planet Waves running. I've got to pay them all, and we have to keep the lights on, and we have to pay our ISP bills. So if you like what I'm doing, look, if you don't like what I'm doing, click the little thumbs down thing, and there's about 2 billion other astrology video podcasts. But if you like what I'm doing, get yourself a membership, and if you sign up for a Horoscope Lover membership, which is our cheapest level, I'll upgrade you for free for the first year to Core Community membership, just to give you a taste of what that's about. So you'll see, go to the planetwaves.fm website or members.planetwaves.net and see what I'm doing here, and maybe we'll edit in a little button on top of this thing in a second. Don't forget to tune in Tuesday to Planet Waves FM. It comes out every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. One of my very favorite things to do during the week. And the horoscope comes out on Sunday night for the week. And that too is a subscription service. And the thing about my subscription services is that they are worth it. I do my work. I'm at this pretty much 7 days a week, and I set a pretty high standard for the work that I do. My standard is not set by the astrological profession. I will tell you that. I answer to a higher authority. Let's just say that. Okay, so thanks for tuning in. Lots of love, and bye for now.